I want to bring in Andrew Eneim. He's a longtime Green Party member and labor organizer. He was a leader in the graduate student unionization efforts at Johns Hopkins. He's joining the campaign as their people organizer. And he's going to help us build out the grassroots capacity to do everything we were just talking about. So it's not just Owen and I. We're not just we're not just a think tank and a live stream and some policy advocates. We're an actual campaign that's out there engaging with people and making connections and building the power we need for grassroots democracy. And with that, I want to bring on Andrew. Welcome, Andrew. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Excited to be here. And yeah, really happy to have a chat.
Okay, before we get to the chat, you're going to get this. Excellent. We got to do that for every now and then when we have the guests on, because we do applaud you and we're happy that you're here and we're happy that we get a chance to talk to you. So I'm really excited to have this conversation tonight. Thank you for joining us. Owen, why don't you get us started off?
Yeah, so Andy read your fancy bio, but tell us a little bit more, about yourself and why you're a Green.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Southern California all my life. Went to college there and came to Baltimore, where I live now, to get a doctorate, and then discovered how much of what I think my actual calling in this life is organizing and not doing science in a lab all the time, which is a totally fine thing to experience when you're, coming in at 22 and have no idea what to do with your life. So, but yeah, I mean, I think for me, my sort of journey to becoming a Green, I have never voted in a presidential election that didn't have Donald Trump on the ballot. It's never happened. The entire time, my first election was 2016. Every presidential election since then has had that as the lesser evil, right? And I hear a lot of this talk about like, oh, if only we could go back to 2016, before all this started. And frankly, what was happening before that is what caused it. This is a system that sort of rolled out the red carpet for someone like Trump to gain traction and appeal to the worst in people, but the reason being that people are hurting and people need an alternative and they need something that's not the status quo. And so I'm a Green because I believe in the values of the party, and I also see that the difficulty in being able to maintain an independent party like this for so long speaks to sort of the deep commitment that a lot of the organizers past and present have. And I hope to sort of contribute to that and the growth of other independent parties as well, not just Greens.
Yeah. And, I think it's really important to ask that question. How did you decide to do this thing that is very hard and feels like it is oftentimes unlikely to succeed because it is fighting against the toughest systems? And I appreciate hearing that origin story in that broader context. Also, on a more following on tune or on the line of what we were talking about before, you did some organizing for some legislation that was in Annapolis this week. HB 120 is a bill that you prepared testimony for with a group of folks at Hopkins, and we released a statement on it. Our statement will be in the show notes, but I want to let you talk about what HB 120 was, your organizing on it, and the position you took.
Yeah. So a group of Hopkins grad students have periodically done sort of Hill Days in DC where, they're scientists using their expertise to inform policy. And this year, that group, who I've known about for some time, but here and there kind of went to events, they were like, we want to go to the State House and we want to influence policy there. Someone reached out to me. They knew I had done stuff in the State House before and I knew about Maryland politics. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'm in. And one of the things we wanted to work on was regulating AI and AI data centers in particular, which HB 120 is about. And for those that aren't familiar, the thing that powers ChatGPT and other AI, a lot of that is a giant warehouse of computers that are able to do all of these things that can produce us the fancy Google a lot of the times. So I know we all do it sometimes. And one of the downsides of this is that they're very consuming of energy. They're consuming of fresh water. They're big polluters. And we've seen the worst of what happens in Memphis. There's a bunch of data centers in Virginia, and they're placed near communities, and they cause sort of crazy health detriments. And this is something that's coming to Maryland. There's tons of proposals across the state to build these data centers. And people across the state are pretty frustrated by it. And a lot of the organizing has been within those counties. And they're saying, hey, county officials, reverse this approval or delay this, or actually let us have input. But there hasn't really been a lot on the state level. And so HB 120 was introduced. It was introduced by the Republican Freedom Caucus. So they have ulterior motives, as far as I can tell. But essentially what it would do is it would place a moratorium on data center construction in the state, but it would allow for the construction to go forward if they are required to be located on the same site as a gas plant or a nuclear plant or a small energy reactor. So they are trying to find a way to bring more gas plants into the state and pollute the environment more, or bring rushed building of nuclear plants to get these data centers online. That could be incredibly unsafe, because their motive is not one driven by let's protect people from pollution. It's, well, let's just make sure that the energy bills don't go up and I can get reelected. So we submitted testimony on this bill. We were in support of the moratorium, but we submitted an amendment. So we basically said strip out the co-location, the gas plants, the nuclear plants, just put a moratorium, because that's the only bill that's actually addressing this in the legislature this year. There are a lot of other things that need to be addressed about how these data centers are going to impact people in this state. We don't have transparency about how they're actually going to interact with, are they actually going to build it with labor from in the state? Is it going to be unionized labor? Is it going to be workers that they bring in from other places? Are there going to be permanent jobs that actually stay for people? These are arguments that all of these companies are using about, we're going to bring jobs, we're going to bring revenue, but there's no actual guarantees that any of these things they're saying are true. And so there's a lot that has to be done. And so, we were in support of the moratorium part, right? Because the legislature is not dealing with it right now. And so if they're not going to deal with it and they're not going to make sure we do this right, we need to stop, and we need to not allow this to happen until we can actually put in the time and the effort to figure out how actually are we going to regulate this industry to make sure that Marylanders benefit and are not adversely impacted. Because once they're built and once these plants are online, one, they're a lot harder to get rid of, and two, the damage will be done by the time that we get back to it. And so that's sort of the summary of that fight. And the hearing happened. It was sort of, it was an interesting hearing, I would say, of the consensus sort of being, we got to make sure the energy bills don't go up. And that's sort of the only thing that matters. So it was clear to me that the consensus here is, let's just make sure we get reelected because the energy bills don't get up, and not thinking through, there's a lot of things we need to deal with. And yes, it's new technology, AI, and it's like really growing, and these data centers are relatively new. That doesn't mean we should shy away from taking a look at it and actually investigating how should we do this right.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is most interesting about this is the far right Freedom Caucus and Governor Westmore have come to a convergence on this question of co-location. So earlier on the show, back in 2025, we talked about how Governor Moore and 3 other governors, on behalf of the data center lobby, went to the regional grid operator with a proposal for co-location. And he too wants gas plants next to the data center. I mean, to the Freedom Caucus's credit, they are at least calling for a moratorium until that co-location occurs. When Governor Moore signed the critical infrastructure bill in 2024, he touted it as supercharging the data center industry in the state. And so I think this is one of those places. We're not saying both parties are the same, but we're highlighting a place where both parties agree. Both parties, the far right side of the Republican caucus in the House of Delegates and Governor Moore, agree that we should build gas plants next to the data centers. And to me, that's because they're thinking about it through a lens of energy bills, not through an environmental justice and environmental racism lens. We can see from places like Curtis Bay and other places across the state what happens when we co-locate fossil fuel infrastructure in people's neighborhoods. It increases cancer rates, it increases asthma rates, and increases toxic material that people have to deal with. And it is often going to be in the communities that can least organize in order to resist this type of thing coming into their community.
Yeah, so definitely. And if if one were a corporate lobbyist working for the data center industry, I mean, this would be the strategy, right? To have the far right propose this kind of, controversial moratorium with a big loophole in it, and have the governor try to supercharge the industry without a moratorium, and really splinter any kind of traditional left, right, red, blue coalition from forming against it. So it seems like they're both not even playing into the hands of, they're both, I think,
working for the lobby.
They're working for the lobby, just in different ways. And
one last thing before we get to the next question. At the beginning, Owen, you were asking what it's like in Annapolis. And this hearing was fascinating because this hearing was not necessarily super well orchestrated. It was also at the end of the day. And what ended up happening was Delegate Fisher, who we mentioned earlier in our panel, who is the chair of the Freedom Caucus in the House, got up and read the bill. And like three people who could not agree with him less got up and were on his panel, and they were either opposed or favorable with the amendment. They were all taking positions similar to what Andrew's organization took, which was to call for just the moratorium and not the other pieces. And so you got this guy who's far right Freedom Caucus guy up there sort of reading the bill. And the panel that looks like is his panel is like, we are, democratic socialists fighting against the data center, or we are environmentalists fighting against the data center. It was one of those things where it's a reminder that some of this stuff is well orchestrated and well put together, but some of it is like real kind of the basic nuts and bolts of government don't always operate with high dollar orchestration and things like that. Sometimes it's the end of a day and please just come up here and say your 2 minutes so that we can go home. So I thought that part was interesting. Watching the hearing was fascinating because it was like, these are people who would never be anywhere close to that man, who were sharing the sponsor panel with him and not agreeing with him at all. Like, it was not well stage managed, or it was rushed. I don't know how to describe it, but it was an interesting thing to see in the hearing. I don't know if you noticed this, Andrew, but I noticed it and thought it was kind of funny, so.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to ask you about, something that I really appreciated about our friendship and organizing over the years is our labor organizing. And you and your union at Hopkins of the grad workers and researchers, a couple of years ahead of the organizing I was doing with the first the part-time faculty and then the full-time faculty at community college where I work. So you'd be someone I'd call and we'd have 45-minute conversations about labor organizing strategy and that sort of thing. So I wanted to ask you about that, and if you could share with listeners what it was like to fight one of the wealthiest institutions in the state. I mean, really, an organization that touts itself as one of the preeminent universities, research institutions in the world, and really being in the belly of that beast and building worker power. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time. I've been at Hopkins for 7 years almost, and I think it's interesting because I'll ask a lot of people sort of why they got involved in our union. I got involved at the beginning because I realized, hey, it's not as easy to do research as it should be at a place that is so well funded and such a leader in all of these different places, I like struggle to pay my rent. So it's not very easy for me to just go to work and not have this added stress of I'm going to take on credit card debt to be able to like make ends meet. And so someone had a conversation with me and they were like, hey, we should do something about this. And, you know, this for a long time, it was like 5 of us in a room and we'd be on a call like this, right? And we'd just be talking to each other about what are we going to do? Like, what's the plan? What's the strategy? All these kinds of conversations. And at a certain point, we were able to really get ourselves organized and say, we're going to actually just talk to everyone that works here. We then figured out it was 3,000 people that are in grad programs at Hopkins who also are paid to do research or teaching. And then we realized we had our work cut out for us. But I think it was sort of an example of the kind of deep organizing that can make big change. I mean, over the next few years after that, we were able to win a union. Over 2,000 people voted to join. And they were going in a secret ballot election, and over 2,000 of them went, and like 67 of them voted no. So it was like pretty clear.
90-something%, right?
97% of the voters voted yes, and that was 2/3 of everyone that works there in the grad union, basically. And so it was pretty clear that people needed change. And then we had to negotiate, right? We had to put people that just work there across the table from their bosses, and they had to confront them and say, this is what we need. And we found a way by which they would actually move. And it's not actually having access is the thing I really took away from this. It's not the opportunity to be in front of them that actually gets them to give you what you need, right? That's why they do these different councils, or, you know, a lot of workplaces will have like, oh, we'll do this meeting where you can air your grievances. And a lot of that is so that you feel like you're being listened to, but then when nothing actually happens. And so in this case, we were always organizing. We were always saying, you know what, if you don't want to give us an actual raise, then what if 500 of us spend an entire day picketing in front of the hospital, in front of the big sign that you do photo ops at? What if we go hand people, like the parents of the graduating seniors, flyers saying how bad their teachers are being treated? And so we did all of these things to really demonstrate that, like, when we're all united, we actually can make change. And that's why, you know, the average raise was, you know, 25%, tens of thousands of dollars for some people. I got like a $10,000 raise because of this, and that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so I think it really goes to show how, like, just really building those relationships and solidifying the trust that you have in each other. You know, these other people that I work with, we're not friends. Well, not all of them, right? I have some friends, but, you know, they're people that I see. They come from all walks of life. We differ politically, but what mattered is that we shared a common goal and decided we're going to work together to meet that common goal. And that's still happening now as well. There's a research staff union that just started their unionization process. They're also going to be fairly large. There's a lot of, you know, it's big research universities, a lot of people that do the work. And so they're also signing up people to join a union. And it's in part because they were inspired by what we did. And also we want to help them. And a lot of us that are in the grad union are helping them. And we're coaching them through it. And we're taking those phone calls for 45 minutes where they're like, I don't know how to get through to this person. Because that's sort of what building up this movement is about. It's about really transcending these divides that were put in by, you know, the oligarchs, the billionaires. They want us divided. That's why they have this two-party system where they actually get to influence it all. It's all connected to the fact that they don't want all of us, the people that actually do the work, that are able to make everything run. They don't want us to have control of it. And so they're looking for any way that they can prevent that. And this is one way in the labor movement that I think we can really get past that and start to make real change. And I take a lot of examples from that in all the other organizing I do.
Yeah, I think that every time we talk about this, I'm so excited to hear the story of it. And I'll put the link to the YouTube or to the show we did, I think, in 2024, where you really went in depth about this process. You know, we talked about the movement for grad student organizing. We talked about what you all did. It was right as I think you were at a major inflection point that you won, of course. And we'll put that in the show notes. And it's that type of experience that we think is super exciting and why we're so happy to have you coming on board as a person that's going to help us do the people organizing, because all of those lessons that you've learned are absolutely essential in kind of building the kind of movement that we need to challenge this oligarchic system. And, you know, it's not the first campaign you've worked on. We worked together on Franca's campaign, Franca Mueller-Paz's campaign back in 2020. We've worked on some other things, but specifically Franca's campaign, because that was such an exciting, powerful, and outcome-changing campaign. Can you talk about that campaign, what your experience with it was like, and what you took away from that you'll be bringing into this work?
Yeah, I think that campaign was really, for me, an example of what it is we're trying to build outside of the two-party system, right? Franca ran as a Green in a general election in a deep blue city that has no Republicans ever competitive even in these elections, right? So it's really a one-party town. And what it took to get there was we had to convince a lot of people who are always voting Democrat, because that's sort of the only thing anyone does here, to say, you know what, that's not good enough. And that's not a thing we see in national politics at all, right? We reduce it down to, oh, well, you pick one of the two, and like that's all we get, and we just have to accept it. And the challenging that notion was really what this campaign did. I mean, it was so many different people across the city coming in to help support this campaign because they believed that something had to change. This was a Democrat who was an incumbent, had been around, like near the levers of power for a long time, worked for the previous councilman, shared the name, ended up becoming the councilman. And we pulled off, you know, quite a feat, raised a lot of money, especially for a general election and not a Democrat. We got over a third of the vote in that race, which crazy performance for also the same election in which Donald Trump was on the ballot. Like it's like really challenging this notion that like the only two choices are we got to go all the way down the ballot, one or the other. We have to really consider that local politics is and local and state politics is really a vessel for change, and it's one that we need to be using to really challenge people's preconceived notions about how the political system is supposed to work. And I think what I take most from that is sort of what I'm going to be bringing to this campaign is it was the deep relationships that we had with each other, right? Everyone on the campaign at least kind of knew everyone else, right? We had a lot of ways where people could actually meet each other. We had a lot of different events that a combination of virtual events, hybrid events, in-person events, right? We were up against the COVID pandemic, so we had to like get really creative with how we were going to build connection with people when most of them are staying home. And so it was sort of bringing these people together to say, we're going to find a way to make this work and actually build meaningful connections with each other. And a lot of those persist to this day. I'm friends with a lot of the people I worked with on that campaign. I'm here now, right? That was my gateway into the local Green Party. And so it's really the trust that people build makes it a lot easier to meet these common goals together. And sometimes we go common goal first and trust later. And then when we start having disagreements at the last minute, you know, you start debating over what's the exact thing we're actually going to do. Sometimes it's too late. You know, you can end up not finishing the job because the argument came pretty late and everyone is sort of thinking, oh, you're trying to change it last minute. And if we build that trust ahead of time and continually do it, we know that we're coming from a good place and we're able to have a better discussion. And so I think that's what I'm really bringing to this is building up those relationships that will allow us to really withstand what is a really difficult time. And especially when you're in an environment like this, you are challenging a system that is doing everything it can to stop you. And you have to have a good grounding in the people you're doing it with in order to really withstand that. And so that's the kind of culture I'm hoping to bring and provide some of the infrastructure. I'm only one person, but the idea would be that I get other people and then other people and then other people, and it branches out, right? That's really the way that this is always done. So yeah, that's the that's what I hope to really bring.
Yeah, I think that it's really bring back a lot of good memories from 2020. And I think, I remember working with you on developing our safety protocol for, we were double masking and had face visors, and we're doing 6 feet, and we're distributing PPE on doors, before or better than a lot of other public facing entities were doing at that time, right? And I saw you applying your scientific knowledge to organizing, and so yeah, it brings back a lot of good memories, Andrew. And so but that was a council race, right? East Baltimore and parts of north central Baltimore. Hopkins is big, but not as big in most respects as the state of Maryland. So what does people organizing mean for a campaign that is statewide? We're talking about a state with more than 6 million people, and how do we build real relationships, both as a campaign team, which we've been doing, but also at a state level?
Yeah. I mean, I've thought about this question a lot, especially as the time has come closer for me to actually start doing the job, because we've been talking about potentially doing it for a while. But I think it's what I've started to really think on lately is really relying on the personal relationship and the trust building being the center of it. And that applying not just to like, we have to have that built up with every person who volunteers for the campaign, but more realistically, we need to find those people that want to do something and are willing to build those relationships with people and sort of empower them and elevate them into positions of leadership themselves, right? This is a thing I did a lot in my union campaign. It's how I ended up working for Franca. I was volunteering first, and then she was like, "Will you actually want to do it as your job for a bit?" And it's like, it's not just about being leaders, it's about developing other leaders. That's what a real leader actually does. And so that's the kind of thinking I'm going into this with, is I'm going to build relationships, and I'm going to do as many as I can. But as one person, I'm also going to be looking for who is another person that I'm like, I think you are a person that has deep commitment, that I can build trust with, that I know will also go and find 5 more people to come knock on doors with you. Or you're going to find 5 people to come to the farmer's market with you. And I'm going to say, I think you are that person. And I'm going to work with them to really build up those skills. It doesn't matter if you've done it before, right? I have no problem if this is your first time ever getting engaged at all politically, or the first time out of the 2 parties. I'm looking to work with you and to really develop that instinct that you have, and also to learn from you. I don't know everything. I've done a lot and I have experience in some things, but also a lot of this is going to be, I live in Baltimore City, and if you live in Charles County, I want you to tell me how this is going to work there, right? And I want to give you the tools to be able to go talk to your neighbors and to talk to people in your county, in your city, in your town, anywhere in the state. And so this isn't going to be, me coming in and now suddenly we're going to hit all the targets, right? It's going to be that I'm going to play a part in developing the kind of team that's going to be able to pull it off. And there's going to be a team, and it's going to need to be big. And so I look forward to doing that work and really building it up, because I think there's already a lot of really good people, and there's plenty more people across the state that they're looking for this. And when we find them, we'll be able to really give them those tools.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes me so excited. You're right. We've been talking about this for a very long time. It's been a conversation we've had. You've had this sort of minor matter of finishing your PhD at a world-class research institution. And so, we've been waiting until that happens, which is now happening very soon. And we're so excited that you're coming on board, because all of those experiences that you talk about are exactly what we need to take it to the next step at this point. Sometimes it can feel a little bit like this is a live stream and a research team and an advocacy team, but it has not yet had that place where it kicks in and starts engaging all the people who are interested. And in part, that's simply because Owen works a full-time job. I'm trying to get a business started. all of our other folks are workers and are trying to do this as a second part of what they do. And so bringing folks like Andrew, who you're meeting tonight, and Seth, who came on a couple of weeks ago, on board in more of a role where they're able to do what they do as experts and have developed expertise in, will help us to expand the reach, will help us to expand and be on the ground in Charles County, be on the ground in Western Maryland. I would love it if we could be organizing people to go to that Hagerstown facility that they're building for ICE right now and be part of the protest. And we can't do it right now, and that's okay. It's okay that we can't do it because that's a recognition of the limitations that we have. But adding somebody like you to the team who has this experience of mobilizing and organizing thousands of people is exactly what we need at exactly the moment we need it. I can't wait for, once the ceremony's done and you catch up for all the time that it has taken you to finish a PhD at Johns Hopkins University. I can't wait for you to come on board. I'm so excited about it. And so can you say a little bit about if people who are watching want to get involved, what does meaningful participation for them look like in this campaign? We've talked a little bit about it in an abstract and a theoretical and an organizing perspective, but what is somebody who's sitting out there watching this video and wants to get involved? How can they get involved? What does it look like? What are the tasks or steps or things that they would be doing today, tomorrow, or 270 days from now?
Yeah, I think there are going to be a lot of different options, and they're probably going to change as the campaign goes on. I think it's going to be, at the root of it, though, it is going to be, having conversations with your neighbors saying, hey, I'm volunteering with this campaign. Can you throw $5 so we can get public matching funds, right? I'd be happy to train you on how do you have that conversation, right? This is sort of providing the tools. But it really is going to be use those relationships that you have to move people to consider something different. It's going to be, hey, let's go get 5 of us when it warms up a little bit to the farmer's market. I would never put you out there in this weather. But like sit there with a table and, people come up or as they're walking by, say, hey, do you have a second? We're talking about how to build independent politics in Maryland. Putting yourself out there, really. Another thing that you can do, if you're more introverted, I'm still going to try to get you to come out. I'm still going to try to get you to get out of your comfort zone. But I can also meet you where you're at. We can start out with, you know what, we got to text all of our donors and see if they could get us like an extra $5 for the next deadline. Or could we go through all the volunteers and could you email them and see if they'll come to this event, right? There's going to be a lot of ways to plug in, and I'm happy to really adapt it to where you're at. But also we're going to have to become real comfortable with each other and challenge each other a little bit. And that's the kind of like growth oriented mindset I'm hoping to bring. And I'm hoping that people will challenge me too, and tell me when it's like, hey, I don't like this. It's like, all right, I need to think through like, what are we going to be able to work out here? Because I need to hone my skills as well. But yeah, I mean, those are sort of some of the concrete examples. It could be emailing people, it could be texting people, it could be knocking on your neighbor's door. It could be calling your family that you live an hour from and being like, hey, you want to support this thing I'm doing? I'll give you the tools on how to have that conversation, how to start it. We can brainstorm. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of different ways to really plug in and contribute to the campaign.
Excellent. I can't wait. And, in a couple of weeks, we'll have you come back on once everything is set up and talk to people about how they can plug in actually and, how it's going and things like that. And if you have the time, we'd love to have you as a regular guest to update folks on the different efforts we have. I know you have a lot of ideas and we have a lot of ideas, and there's been a lot bubbling, and it's really great timing that as the weather is going to start to get warmer, you're going to be coming on in this role because, we're not going to drag anybody out in the 5-degree weather with all the snowcrete we have right now. But there will be a time when we're going to need folks out there, and it's going to be nice. And, it'll be great to have you in the organizer role at that point. So, I'm very excited about it, and I'm eager to see what we can become, because I think we have done a great job of building the foundation, building the research base, building the policy base, building this show, building our advocacy, so that people can see we're serious about this. And the next step is to bring the people to the party, because that's how we grow, that's how we get bigger, and that's how we do the things we need to do. So, but I do have one last question before we go. So the last couple of years, we've gone to a lot of baseball games together. Some of those seasons have been really good for the Baltimore Orioles. Some of them have been not so good for the Baltimore Orioles. About half and half since we started going to games together. We've seen some playoff victory, some playoff baseball, some disappointing losses. Pitchers and catchers report in a couple of days. Opening day is next month. What's your take on what the Orioles are going to be like this year?
Look, I see a playoff win this year. I'm not saying how deep, but I could see something happen. They got a chip on their shoulder after the last few years, so I could see it happening where they, maybe they squeak in the wild card, have a rough patch in the season. I'm sure that'll happen. I've seen it before. But I'm feeling good. I think they have recognized that they've come up short and have really thought about it. And there's some new pieces coming in that I think could really contribute. So, I'm gonna throw it out here now. A playoff series win.
Yeah, I mean, I will just throw it out there and say, I believe this is the year. I believe the Orioles magic. I believe it every year, but this year I believe it too. And I believe in that Orioles magic. I believe that this is going to be the time that we bring that trophy back, and we're going to raise so much money that we have an ad on during the World Series that is like, vote for Owen and Andy, because they're the ones who believe in you, believe in the people, and believe in the Orioles. And then we're gonna ride that World Series victory right into the election, and show everybody that the impossible can come true right here in Baltimore and right here in Maryland. So we'll see. You're laughing now, and I imagine that at some point you'll be like, remember when you said this is going to be the year we win all of it? And you'll be like, I did say that, I did. But I like your approach. One playoff win, somewhere between one playoff win and winning the whole thing. I'll take any of that. So
right. I'm happy to be wrong.
Yeah, I'm happy to be right. I'd love it if this is the year that we get to have that. We get to have that parade here, the Orioles magic blasting from the boombox, and everything going, turning up orange and black. So, Owen, anything before we let Andrew go?
Yep. Thanks so much for joining us. Looking forward to organizing with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Keep up the excellent work. We can't wait to have you officially join. Great preview of it tonight. And congratulations on finishing your PhD. It's a real accomplishment at an institution that doesn't make it easy, especially when you had to fight so hard in order to be able to pay your bills and to have your fellow workers pay their bills. But that's good work, and you're graduating with the PhD, and we're really happy for you. Congratulations, and we can't wait for you to join us.
Yeah, proud of you, dude.
Thank you.